Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. If you're new here, hi, my name is Larki. I make lifestyle and true crime videos. If you're not, welcome back. Thank you for joining me for another video. Today's video is going to focus on the murders of two women with the same name living in the same city, and they happened within just days of each other. Today I'm going to be sharing with you the Mary Morris murders out of Houston, Texas. And next month actually marks the 20-year anniversary on the cases, and they remain unsolved. As with a lot of the older cases that I share on this channel, some of the information was a little inconsistent, and that's because I got a lot of the information from like blog posts, podcasts, and Reddit threads, and I'll actually put the Reddit thread right here that I first read of this case from. So a huge shout out to them, because without this Reddit thread, I actually would not have found out about this case. On the surface, both Marys had a few similarities between them, like they looked a little bit alike. They were both married and they were both living in Houston, but once you take a closer look at the lives of each Mary, you'll kind of start to sense the differences, and that's what we're going to be getting into now. Both victims had the same name, which was Mary Morris. The first victim was Mary Lou Henderson Morris, and the second victim was Mary McGinnis Morris. So for the first victim, I'm going to be referring to her as Mary Lou, and the second victim is going to be just simply Mary. That way we can differentiate between the two. Without further ado, let's go ahead and get started. Mary Lou was 48 years old. She had been happily married for 5 years to her husband, Jay Morris, and she had a daughter who I believe is from a previous relationship. Her name was Marilyn Blaylock. Marilyn worked as a loan officer for Chase Bank, where she had been working for 15 years. Her daughter described her as one of the nicest people you'd ever want to know. She was active, devoted, and kind, and she was always nice to everyone and was always working on something. As far as everyone knew, Mary Lou had no enemies, and when the police questioned those who knew her, they had nothing but great things to say about her. On October 12th of the year 2000, Mary Lou started her day just like any other. At around 6 a.m., she said goodbye to her husband Jay and left for work at Chase Bank, which was located in the Spring Valley area of Houston. Throughout the day, Jay had tried calling Mary Lou a few times, but she didn't answer or return any of his calls. At 5 p.m., Jay decided to call Mary Lou's supervisor, who told him that Mary hadn't come into work that day and they hadn't been able to get a hold of her. Jay knew something was wrong and immediately contacted police to file a missing persons report. At around the same time, someone driving in an off-road vehicle in a remote area of Harris County contacted police to report a burning vehicle. The vehicle was found to be Mary Lou's Chevy Lumina. That same day, at around 10:20 in the morning, someone had contacted the fire department about smoke coming from that same area, but they didn't look into it because they just thought it was a controlled fire from burning leaves or something. When they arrived at the scene, police found Mary's body in the driver's seat, but it was completely unrecognizable. They found that she had been drenched in gasoline and set on fire. The medical examiner was able to confirm her identity using tooth fragments found at the scene, but due to the state of her body, they were unable to confirm an exact cause of death. The only items missing were Mary Lou's wedding ring and purse. This was interesting because Mary Lou was wearing other jewelry and there were other valuables in the car that were left behind. The location for where Mary Lou's car was found was also interesting because it was only 3 miles away from Mary Lou and Jay's home, but it was facing in the opposite direction of where she would have been driving if she were heading to work. Since Mary Lou was so well liked and respected, police had no clues for any suspects or potential motive. They were also unable to determine her whereabouts between 6 o'clock in the morning when she left her house and 10:20 when the fire department received the first signs of smoke. Police had no leads to go on until something interesting happened. The day right after Mary Lou's murder, a Houston newspaper, the Houston Chronicle, received a call from an unknown person. The person simply uttered the words, "They got the wrong Mary Morris," and hung up. No one knew what this message would mean until 3 days later. And this is when we get into the second victim, who was Mary McGinnis Morris. Mary was a 39-year-old nurse practitioner. She had a successful career and was in charge of various clinics. She had a 17-year marriage to her husband, Mike Morris, and they had just moved to Houston from West Virginia just 2 years prior to her murder. Unfortunately, Mary and Mike began having problems in their marriage shortly after the move. Most of these problems stemmed from financial pressures, as Mike had been having trouble securing a job since their move. There were also allegations of infidelity. Mike suspected Mary of having an affair with a family friend, although he reportedly confronted Mary and the family friend about his suspicions, which they both denied, and he was kind of put at ease. And like they say, when it rains, it pours, because poor Mary, she wasn't having enough issues in her personal life, she also started having problems at work. She loved her job, but she had started clashing with a male nurse who had just recently been hired, whose name was Dwayne Young. There wasn't much information on the severity of their issues, but one day Mary arrived to work to find her desk in disarray, like all her pictures were turned the other way, and she also found a message on her calendar which had the words "death to her" written on it. Dwayne Young was fired shortly after, but it wasn't confirmed if it was directly because of this incident. After that happened, Mary got so spooked, as would anyone, that she actually went to Mike and asked him to teach her how to use a gun. So Mike purchased the gun, registered it under his name, and after teaching her how to use it, he placed it under Mary's passenger seat. Sunday, October 15th of the year 2000 was meant to be a day of running errands for Mary. She had gone to the post office, she went grocery shopping, and she stopped by her job to administer a flu shot to her colleague and friend Lori Gemmell. She mentioned to Lori that after finishing her errand, she had plans of going home and making dinner. However, that wouldn't be the last time that Lori would hear from Mary that day. A little while later, Mary was at her last stop for the day, which was the Eckerd drugstore. She called Lori because she had seen someone that had kind of like given her the creeps, so she was just on the phone with Lori mentioning that. I saw one report that said that Mary made a comment to Lori kind of saying like, "Oh, I think this might be Dwayne," or "this looks to be Dwayne." According to Lori, Mary wasn't like too freaked out by the fact that it could have been Dwayne. She kind of just said it matter-of-factly. And again, that was just one report that said that, so I'm not sure if that was entirely true. During this conversation, Mary told Lori that she was going to stop by the office to log out of the computer system before heading home for the night. Only 12 minutes after this call, a call was made from Mary's cell phone to 911. The 911 call has never been released to the public due to its disturbing nature, and investigators have explained that anyone who has heard the call has immediately gotten chills in their body. Police believe that the call contains what were Mary's last few moments alive. When Mary never made it home that evening, Mike reported her missing to police. The next day, she was found dead in her car. Mary's car was also found in a secluded area. The car was found with the passenger side door open and blood splattered everywhere. Mary's body was found inside with a gunshot wound to the head and a gun in her hand. The scene was staged to look like a suicide, but after a closer look, investigators knew that what they were looking at was a murder. Mary's body had defensive wounds on it, which means she tried to fight back her attacker, and that coupled with the 911 call from the day before kind of confirms police suspicions. Mary's wedding ring was also missing from the scene, and later through forensic testing, it was confirmed that Mary was shot with her own gun. And with all the evidence and similarities that were popping up between the two cases, police did not believe that the cases were linked, although the families were not convinced. And police didn't think the cases were linked for a few different reasons. For example, although both cars were found in secluded areas and they were only 25 miles away from each other, Mary Lou's car had been set on fire and she was burned inside, while Mary had just been shot and her car was left just fine. They also had no clues for any suspects in Mary Lou's murder, but they had a few possibilities in Mary's case. The main suspect in Mary's murder was her husband, Mike. Upon investigation, police found that 2 hours after Mary's frantic 911 call, Mike had made a 4-minute call to Mary's cell phone. When Mike was questioned about this, he told police that he had tried calling Mary and he let the phone ring 4 times, but she never answered. When they told him that this was impossible and the phone company confirmed that the call was answered, otherwise it wouldn't have shown up in phone records, he insisted that he was calling Mary, but she never answered. He refused to take a polygraph and he immediately got a lawyer. He also refused to allow police to question his daughter, and I believe she was from a previous relationship because Mary McGinnis herself didn't have any children. Investigators also found that Mary had a hefty life insurance policy. Depending on the source, it is said to be worth anywhere from $500,000 to $700,000, and Mike was set as the primary beneficiary for it. And lastly, remember Mary's missing wedding ring from the crime scene? A few months after the murder, a family friend spotted Mike's daughter wearing the ring, and when he was asked about it, he claimed that he just happened to find it just like laying around in the house, which a lot of people find to be strange, including myself, because if there is an item that people believe was at a crime scene and they believe it to be missing, but it ends up being at your house, that's something that should be reported so that police know not to look for it or not to find it suspicious if they do happen to find it elsewhere. With all this circumstantial evidence piling up, Mike did have an alibi for the time of Mary's murder, and he was actually out at the movies with his daughter. Another suspect is Dwayne Young, who was the co-worker that Mary had been clashing with at work. The message that he left her on the calendar, "death to her," Was that an actual death threat, or was it an empty threat that he followed through with after he got fired? If the person that Mary saw at the drugstore when she was on the phone with Lori was actually Dwayne, did he follow her afterwards? Remember, that phone call, that 911 phone call from Mary, was just 12 minutes after her phone call with Lori. So that's something to think about as well. With possibilities leading to two different suspects in Mary's case, police maintain that both murders were truly a coincidence, but in a city with 2 million people, what are the odds of that happening? A lot of people who follow this case believe that this was probably a hit gone wrong, like someone hired a hitman to take out Mary McGinnis, but they got the wrong person by accident. This would explain why there are no leads in Mary Lou's murder. This would also explain the missing wedding rings from both crime scenes. A lot of blogs mention that in hitman situations, they always take something like a wedding ring from the victim to confirm that the job was completed or the deed was done or whatever. So that would be a good explanation for that. The only other thing that came up in Mary Lou's case was that 6 months after her murder, her husband Jay received a crazy cell phone bill, and he was charged an additional $2,000 on his wife's phone card. The police traced the calls to a 16-year-old girl who had claimed to have found a purse a month before in a convenience store parking lot. When they finally grabbed the purse and showed it to Mary Lou's family members, none of them recognized the purse as hers. And around this time, Jay had also been receiving strange phone calls. The phone calls consisted of a man asking for Mary Lou, and Jay didn't really know how to go about it, so he would just say, "She's not home right now," and then the conversation would be over. When he mentioned this to police, the police instructed him to give the caller the phone number to the Harris County Sheriff's Department. So in the following call, when the person asked, "Hey, is Mary Lou home?" or "Is Mary Lou available?" Jay gave them the phone number for the police department, as he was instructed to do, and the person just said, "Oh yeah, right," and then hung up, and they never called again. So that's all the information on this case. What do you guys think? Leave a comment down below and let me know what you think. I personally do believe the hitman theory. I do think that maybe someone had it out for Mary McGinnis and they accidentally got the wrong person. My only thing with that, the only thing that stops me from fully believing that is that I feel like whoever would hire a hitman would give like a good description, or at least a photo of the person that they want to take out. A lot of people say that both Marys looked alike. I'll put pictures of them right here. They look alike. I do see the similarities, but they're not like doppelgangers. You know what I'm saying? I feel like if someone was to hire a hitman, they would provide a photo and be like, "This is your target." Like, I just don't see how any mistakes could happen, but I mean, I guess you never know. I don't know how these things work. This is truly one of those cases that just has you thinking. And again, next month is the 20-year anniversary for the murders, and nothing has ever came up on them. The cases have remained unsolved. If you've made it to this point in the video, thank you so much for watching. I do hope that you like, comment, and subscribe so you never miss an upload on any true crime stories or any lifestyle content. I'll see you guys next time.